Hi everyone! In this tutorial video, we will be using the Business Entity Recognition Service. It is part of the AI Business Services portfolio. And with that service, you can extract entities from your text data. Text data can be anything like email text, service tickets, or any other text data. And entities are, for example, addresses, names, telephone numbers, nationalities, speed, or document type. There are 4 pre-trained models that you can use. And they have a lot of entities that you can already extract in the pre-trained models. But the service is customizable. That means you can also use your own training data to retrain the models. If you, for example, have entities that are just not available yet, or if you have, for example, invoice numbers that are very particular and the current model does not pick them up so well. Yeah, so the service has different models available in different languages. We will have a look at it later. You can do single inferences where you simply send a string, or batch inferences where you send a lot of data. I will show you both today, and we will try out 2 of the pre-trained models. Yeah, so you can access the service via the Swagger user interface, which I will briefly show today, or via the AI API, which is the standardized interface of AI Core, or what we will be doing in this tutorial, via the Python SDK. So let's go ahead and start. Okay, let's start on the SAP help page for the Business Entity Recognition Service. There you basically find all the important information that you need if you want to use the Business Entity Recognition Service. And what we need right now is, if you check under API reference, Inference API, extracted entities by pre-trained model. There you will see these 4 models here: SAP address entity, SAP email business entity, SAP generic entities, and SAP invoice header. And we will try 2 of those pre-trained models today. The cool thing about pre-trained models is that you do not need any training data or have to do any retraining yourself. You can just use the models the way they are right away. So that's pretty cool. And in this tutorial video, we will be using 2 of them, the address entity and the email business entity. So let's have a look. The SAP address entity model can, from any text data that you have, extract the address. It will extract the name of the city, of the country, the name of a sender if there is one, the name of the district, the house number, state, province, street, and zip code. Okay, then we will also use the email business entity model. And that one can, again, from any text, but in this case, the use case is thought of for an email. If you have an incoming email and you want to check whether that is, there's an invoice number in there or a vendor ID in there, then you can use this model. It can only find invoice number and vendor ID. Yeah, so it's a very specific model, but we also have the SAP generic entities model that can find a lot of things, also the address, by the way, and many, many other things. So like nationality, number, organization, phone numbers, speed, temperature, yeah, so any kind of general entities you can extract with this. If you find the entities that you're looking for your use case in this model, then just go ahead and use it. Using a pre-trained one is always easier than retraining it yourself. If for some reason, though, this model cannot really find your entity so well, that can be sometimes when the training data is very different from your data that you're using. Then a retraining can still make sense. So yeah, just try out these models first, and if you think you need a more specific model or your data is just a little bit different, then go for retraining. Yeah, then we have the SAP invoice header model. And this one is actually also used in the document information extraction. Yeah, and this one basically extracts the invoice header. So delivery date, due date, tax information, all kinds of things, total amount. Yeah, cool, but we will use address entity and email business entity. Okay. We will be using the Python SDK to access the models. So there are different ways to access AI Business Services. You can always access them through the Swagger user interface. that I will quickly show you too. And you can, if the service is already migrated to AI Core, use it via the AI API. And some services already have a Python SDK. So we will be using Python today, but I'm going to show you Swagger too. So let's go ahead and check the Python SDK in GitHub. The SDK is called Business Entity Recognition Client Library. Here you also find some examples that you can try out. We will be using different examples today, but you can also try out these. I think in the example they're using a Jupyter Notebook. I will be using PyCharm today, but it's really not important. You can use any Python IDE that you like. This is the code under SAP BER client. If you want to check the code or look for other functions that you want to use, you can do that there. And this is important. Here you see the requirements. So you need a Python 3 environment installed. You can check which version you have. I know that I do have Python 3 installed, but I'm not sure which version I have. So I can check it like this. I have Python 3.9. That's probably enough because it's a very new version. If you have a really old version, you might consider updating it if you run into some problems. Okay, next I wanted to create a service in the BTP cockpit. So let's go to our BTP cockpit. And you will have to go to the service marketplace and look for the business entity recognition. It's already there. It's available on free tier, so you can just try it out. You don't need to pay for it or anything. Okay. Let's create an instance. I'm going to be very creative and call it business entity recognition. Create. Let's view the instance. Okay. And now we have to create a service key. I will call it SK for service key. Business. Usually I do it with underscores, but whatever. Business entity recognition. Great. That might take a couple of seconds. I might cut out the waiting time, so. But it shouldn't take too long. Yeah. Now let's have a look at the service key. Okay, up here you see what I mentioned already, the URL and the Swagger extension for the URL. I will show that in a bit. And here you have the client ID that kind of acts as your username, and the client secret, that's kind of your password. And this is the authentication URL that you need to get the bearer token. And I think that's already the most important things here. Yeah, so let's just have a look at the Swagger UI real quick so that you know what I'm talking about. And you add this extension. Okay, what you see here is different tabs. One is for the data sets that you will need if you want to do a batch inference. We will be doing both today, the single inference where you simply send one text, and batch inference where you upload a dataset first with multiple texts that you want to extract entities from. Then you have the training tab, which you need if you want to do retraining. Here you also upload your training data, or the inference data, as I said. And then with the training tab, you do your retraining. With the models, you can check out which models there are and if your model finished training. Then you deploy your model, and then here's the inference API. You need to authorize yourself to use Swagger. Therefore, you can either get the bearer token here, or, which is probably easier, you just use the client ID that I showed you in the service key. That's kind of the password, the username, and the client secret as the password, and then you authorize yourself like that. Yeah. Okay, so that's if you want to use the user interface, but we will continue with Python now. Okay, So we will come back here later and copy the service key, but first let's open our favorite Python IDE. Use whatever you want. As I said, I will be using PyCharm. And I already created a virtual environment, called it BERN. And let's activate that. A virtual environment is important so that when you install a package, you don't install it everywhere. And so you don't mess up other projects. And also this way, you see which libraries I have installed, and you can just install the same ones, and then your code should run the same way as mine. So it's just, yeah, virtual environments are great, but you probably know that already. Okay, let's go back to GitHub to quickly install our library. We use the pip install command here. Copy that and go back, and then just paste it here. Yeah, I actually already had it installed, but if you have not installed it yet, it will install now. Okay, now we can create our service key JSON. JSON. And paste the service key from our BTP cockpit here. So you just copy the whole JSON and paste it here. Okay, let's create our first Python file. And call it list models. I prepared some example code. Okay, so in this Python file, we have code to just have a look at the models that exist already. Yeah, if you already retrained some models, you will also find it here. If you haven't, like I haven't right now, then you will only see the 4 models that are available. And the cool thing is you can just check which languages are available. You can check which entities you can extract again. So you get similar information than on the help page. Just, yeah, you see if your service key works, if everything is set up correctly. And yeah, so let's just try it out. What we do here is we import the BER API client from the SAP BR client. Then here we read our service key, and here we assign all the values we need to authenticate ourselves, and then we create the instance of our BER API client here by handing over all the authentication information. Yeah, and then we use this function, getTrainedModels. We're expecting to find 4 models, as I said. And then for each of the models that we are expecting to see, I also want to extract some more information. So that's this part in the code. Okay, so let's hit run and see what we have. Great. Okay. Yeah, so we have 4 models as expected. SAP Address Entity has 2 versions. SAP Emails Business Entity has 2 versions. And SAP Generic Entities has 1 version. Invoice Header also 1 version. So the reason why you find models with different version is usually that either a model was trained with different parameters or with different training data. That's usually the things why you would have multiple model versions. Yeah, so let's just have a look at the models. Okay, so here we have the email business entity model. It can extract invoice reference number and vendor ID, as we already know, and it supports the languages English and German. And the other one that we wanted to use was the address entity model. Yeah, the entities we know, we already saw them. And that's the cool part here. Now you see the difference in the model versions. This is model version 2, and it has a lot of languages supported. That's actually new. And this is the old model with only one, the first model version. And here only 2 languages are supported, English and German. Yeah, so we will be using model version 2 because I also have some Italian addresses in there that I want to extract the address from. Yeah. Also, this model works a lot better than version 1. I tried them both, and yeah, I'm really happy with the second model. That's why I wanted to show you. Okay. Yeah, great. Then let's create our first actual file where we post the inference. And new Python file, we call it PostInference. The reason why we have a PostInference file is because we will also have a GetInference file. And that is because the way it works is that you post your inference to the server, to the service. And then you get an ID back, and with that ID you can then access your job, the inference job, and get the result later on, because sometimes it just takes some time and you don't get the result right away. So you get your ID, and with that ID you can then access your result. Okay, I again have some code. Hold on. Okay. So as I said, we do single and batch inference. First of all, let's do the single inference. So I'm gonna uncomment this. Okay, and we will comment out the batch inference part. Okay. Let's check. We have the wrong model. I wanted to use the email business entity model. SAP email business entity. And let's use version 2, since there are 2, right? Let's check again what I think. Yeah, let's use version 2. Yeah, up here you already know the part. It's the same thing. We have to authenticate ourselves and create the instance. Then the model name I'm using is the SAP email business entity model. The model version is model 2. This is going to be the text of the single inference that I will hand over. It's just a string that I made up. Dear Stephanie, I hope you're well. Please see attached the invoice, blah, blah. The invoice is due by the 29th of March, 2022. Please do not hesitate to get in touch, la, 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 la. So yeah, I just made it up. And we will use the function PostInference job and hand over the text, the model name, and the model version. And then we will save the response, which is a JSON, in this inference response JSON file, so that we can access this later to get the results. Yeah, so let's go ahead and run. That's all that is to it. Cool, the job is pending, that's expected, and that means it worked. At least the submission worked. Now let's create our GetInference file. Okay, I can have code, big surprise. Yeah. Okay, again, the same thing. We'll first use the single inference. I need this part here. And I will comment out the batch inference part. We do that after. Okay. Yeah, same thing again. We authenticate ourselves and create an instance of the BR client. Then here I'm going to read the JSON that I just saved the ID in. And I'm going to read the inference job ID from the JSON. And then I will use the function getInference job and hand over the job ID, and then just print the response. Okay, so it was a success. That is good. Let's have a look. With a confidence of 57%, it recognized the vendor, the reference number, which is correct. I'm just kind of curious why it's so low. Maybe let's check the other version and see if version 1 of that model works better. So we just run the post inference again with the model version 1. So we are using a different model now. Same model, but different version. So it probably had different training data or different parameters. I'm not sure because we can't tell And let's see. Okay, this one is 91% sure that this is the reference number, so it works better. That might be because I made up the invoice number, and I don't know, maybe the other model didn't have so much training data with like a dash or something. Yeah, so just check out which model works better for you. This one obviously works better for my type of invoice number. Yeah, if you have an invoice number that looks very different and both models don't work so well, then you want to consider retraining it, so it knows your type of invoice number better, because I mean, invoice numbers can look like anything, right? Okay, cool. Then let's now do the batch inference. So we comment out the single inference. We don't want to do that again. And we use the batch inference. Okay, so here we will use also another model. Why am I using the wrong model names here the whole time? Invoice header. No, that's also the wrong one. Okay, let's quickly check. I forgot which one I wanted to use. Address entity, right? Okay, here are the language. Yeah, SAP address entity was the one. Okay, so let's just change that here too. Okay, and we want to use model version 2 because we already figured out that we like that better. I tested them both, so. Okay, so what happens here? We create a data set of the type inference, and we will have to remember the dataset ID, because we need the dataset ID to actually upload data. With this function here, upload document to dataset, we need the dataset ID and the inference dataset folder. That's the path to this JSON that we will create in a little bit. And up here, I'm going to save the dataset ID in a text file so that we can access this later. But you can also always call for all the dataset IDs. I'm just going to save it anyway, so I know which one I created here. Yes, and then we post the batch inference job. It's basically the same thing as before, just this time we don't hand over a string, like the text data. This time we actually hand over the dataset ID that will have all the text data. Yeah, but again, model version, model name, model version, and save the response in a JSON again. So same thing as before. So let's quickly create our data set, a new file. I will call it, what was the name there? Data batch inference JSON. Okay, and I have the data here. I honestly just copied random addresses from online that I found. Some are American, some are German, some are Italian, and I even have one Turkish one in here just to see whether it also works with an address that actually is not supported, because Turkish as a language is not supported. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and run this. Okay, it's pending, that's great. Then we want to get the inference, so we will comment out the single inference part and use this part. Okay. Yeah, here we will read the job ID again from the JSON that we saved, same thing as before, and then we use the function get batch inference job result with our batch inference job ID. So let's go ahead and run it. It's already done, that was fast. Okay, let's open the dataset so we can actually compare. Okay, so the first address it found is New York, which is true. House number is 123, that's true. State province is NY. Street is Main Street. Zip code, also true, cool. So let's go to the German address here, Hamburg. That's this one here, I think. Yeah. It even found an extra name, Bücherei Hamburg, which means library Hamburg. That's true. And it also found this extra value, Yeah, because what it says here is that the actual address is this Hühnerposten one, which is a very strange name. Anyway, but the entrance is somewhere else, and it actually also found this other address here and returned it as an extra value, which is cool. Then the house number is 1, street is Hühnerposten, strange name, and the zip code is correct. Let's go ahead and check for the Turkish address. This one. So Çankaya, Ankara, that's correct. Turkey, correct. Extra name, Bilkent University, that's correct. That's my university, by the way. Street, also correct. No house number, that's correct. And this correct zip code. Okay, next one is this Italian address. City, town, village, Milano, Italy. University of Milan. House number 7, state, province, MI. Street, Via Festa del Perdono. Cool. I'm actually happy here because I checked the Italian address last time with the old model version 1 where Italian wasn't supported, and it actually found the address too, but it didn't recognize via as a word, like as a part of the address. So now that it knows Italian, it knows that via means something like street, which is cool. And the zip code is also correct. Great. So yeah, that's really cool. Now let's go ahead and delete all the data sets because we don't want to keep them around. So we create a new Python file that I wanted to call, I think, just delete datasets. Yeah, delete datasets. And I have code again, but this one is short and easy. Okay. So again, same thing. We create an instance with all the authentication information. Then we read the dataset ID from the text data and delete the dataset. Hold on. With the dataset ID, not with this ID. I used the code to delete something else earlier. Okay. So let's run this and see if then they're all gone. Yeah, great. The dataset has been deleted successfully. Dataset count 0. Perfect. So we are done. Yeah, that's it. It's actually very easy once you have set up your Python environment to use this service via the Python SDK. Today we used 2 different models and actually tried 2 versions of one of the models. We used single inference and batch inference. I hope you learned a lot and you had as much fun as I did, and I see you in the next video.